Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, today we are back with episode 2 of the Lore Vault with the Eclectic Goat. If you would be so kind as to introduce the audience to yourself and kind of tell people what you do here in
Uh,
Delsfire.
I am the eclectic goat. I am eclectic, and a goat. Um, oh, and I need to mute the YouTube stream because otherwise that's going to get real confusing.
Doesn't appear to be picking it up.
I am the eclectic goat on Twitter and YouTube and Discord. I do videos on uh basically whatever interests me in the moment. I do a lot of role-playing game stuff. In the real world, I edit for tabletop role-playing games, mostly indie creators. And so my great love is promoting indie creators because I don't think they get nearly enough love. Um, I also have a farm and will very frequently go off on ramblings about endangered livestock breeds. And I like books, so I do a series called Hashtag the Book is Better, where I compare books with movies or video games that they have been made into. And then occasionally I just randomly talk about old television shows that I am one of the few people old enough to have seen and why they were so much better than the television we have now. Um,
Alrighty
that's pretty much it.
then. Okay. So let's just start with the RPG thing. So, like, what was the first RPG you played that you can remember?
Redbox. Redbox D&D. Told you I'm old.
Okay. So, for a novice, explain that.
Redbox is the first. So let's see, we'll go back in time here. White box is considered um like the very first D&D, and it's not even really D&D. It's like the very it's the framework for what D&D would become. But it was kind of vague and it didn't have a lot of rules. There literally were magazines where people would write back and forth to each other arguing about how the various things should work. Um, but of course that took a really long time. So they started firming up the rules some, and you end up with the red box. I can talk. Um, which was the first rules, and it had like the DM's guide and the player's guide and a set of dice. Um, and usually like I'm trying to remember if it actually had adventures or if those were always sold separately. Um, and the red box was for beginning players, and then later on they put out a blue box, which was for more advanced players, and then they put out the black box, which was for expert players. And then they scrapped all of it and went to AD&D, which was just books.
Okay. So, out of all the editions of D&D, what would you say was your favorite?
Shadow Dark, which is really just D&D light. No, the thing is that I probably played the most AD&D, but that's only because it's a generational thing.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened to be the time that I was doing the most gaming. But the fact is that it took me the very first time I ever played something that was not Dungeons and Dragons, I realized very quickly that D&D was not actually that great a system. Um, it's very good at a very narrow thing. It's very good for exactly what's in the name, Dungeons and Dragons. Um, but that gets boring very quickly, and they're really bad about just kind of piling more and more rules onto things, which, it used to be the one thing it was also really good at was introducing people to role playing. Um, but that faded very quickly, and it's only gotten worse with every edition. Um, and so I mostly a lot of people got away from Dungeons and Dragons with the OGL fiasco. But I had almost completely abandoned D&D like 20 years ago. Um, AD&D has some positivities, but THACO really does suck. The mechanics for 5th edition are pretty good. but then what they've done with the actual setting is really terrible.
Isn't it
Um,
basically just the Forgotten Realms now, and nothing else gets too much expansion? Or am I misinformed on that?
I mean, they've tried throwing some other stuff in, but they all flop terribly. The new Dragonlance didn't do great. The new oh shoot, what's the space one?
Spelljammer?
Yes, thank you. I don't know why I spaced on that.
See, I know
The
some
new spell
things.
the new Spelljammer's not very good. Ravenloft, they basically have ignored the fact that Ravenloft is anything other than Strahd's area, and Strahd has gotten watered down. Like it's not really scary anymore. I mean,
Yeah,
Ravenloft used to literally be scary.
it was the horror
Um,
setting, basically.
right, but like there are lots of Dungeons and Dragons has tried to do lots of things with different settings, but it's Dungeons and Dragons for a reason. Like I said, it does dungeons well and it does dragons well. It's not it's not really set up to go too far outside your really basic fantasy realm. And I think that's probably the reason it's gotten that aspect has gotten worse with fifth edition. It's less of a flexible game. Um, I think that's why Strahd has always been the area because it's the most fanciful area, whereas some of the others really were more horror driven, and it just doesn't do horror well. I mean, the whole point of horror is for you to feel helpless or lost or frightened. And
Unnerved.
when you're yeah, I mean when you're playing a character whose entire being is going up against scary things, then feeling out of control is kind of not in the cards.
Hmm.
So therefore, it just doesn't make for good horror.
I would
Um,
imagine it also has something to do with, and I don't know if this is an accurate read at all. Um, but just from looking at like art I've seen of modern D&D compared to older D&D. This is just looking at the pictures. Um, to me, it looks like the franchise has kind of gotten towards the filed off fantasy look, which is a term I kind of use to describe the more modern style of fantasy, where instead of like you remember probably looking at the art for I don't know if have you ever heard of Elric? I would assume you have heard of Elric of Melniboné.
yeah. Yep.
Okay. Um so if you like look at art from the old Elric books and you look at art from the old Lord of the Rings books and how different it is, it's very distinct and separate. But a lot of modern fantasy, like genre fantasy, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons, modern like Age of Sigmar, Warhammer. There's a couple other settings I
Yeah.
could probably think of. It looks really similar, and there's stuff you'll notice like in the way it's made, where you'll notice like no area is exclusive. You're gonna have like this is the northern part of whatever world here, but it's the most metropolitan, diverse area you've ever seen, and that's supposedly like super rural and isolated and stuff. It's just like
Yeah.
that's
It's not even that. I reviewed a game recently that the front cover shows a desert and most of the characters are mostly naked, but the main antagonists are frost giants. So it's not the people either. It's that too many games are trying to be everything all at the same time.
mm-hmm. Desert setting and frost giants. That
Yeah, it doesn't work very well.
yeah no I wouldn't think it would.
Um, but it's I really don't think that they considered it that way. I think, the cover looked cool, so they went with the cover. Um, I don't know that it was actually supposed to represent the city itself at all. But again, people are worried about being they're worried about attracting as many people as possible. they're trying to throw as wide a net as possible. Um, but I think the result is that a lot of games are catching nothing because of that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the eternal problem that you get with a lot of companies where they're like, we want to appeal to everyone, and because they want to appeal to everyone, they appeal to no one because they have nothing that makes them unique or interesting. You know.
well, I was going to say that, D&D has lost more people in the attempt to appeal to everyone than I think, they ever have. I mean, yes, there is a certain segment that they're appealing to and they're bringing people in, but they're also losing tons of people.
Yeah, yeah, that's largely
Um,
what I've been hearing because I watch I'm an ADD addicted Zoomer who watches a lot of YouTube, um, and I always find myself attracted to the kinds of channels that cover a subject or two in extreme autistic detail. Um, and one of the ones that I watch on Dungeons and Dragons was pointing out that a lot of the stuff that they've done in the more recent era to make the setting more attractive to the general populace, so to speak, has actually done quite a bit to alienate the long-time people who've been playing the game for decades.
yeah, and what happens is you get people who play for a while, and some of them will stick with it, and some of them will leave, and some of them will move on to other things.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, once Stranger Things stops running, aren't going to play anymore. Some of them have realized that the D&D they're playing is not the D&D that is in Stranger Things. Um, a lot of them are playing thinking it's going to look like Critical Role and be this big theatrical thing, and they're really disappointed when it's not.
Ugh.
Because Critical Role is literally made entirely up of professional actors. um, so your game is not going to look like that.
Yeah.
Um, they, there are a lot of expectations, I think, being formed that aren't really, you know, it's going to be really hard for anything to live up to. Um, I um, I think it's like the art. Okay, so starting with the art, and I don't think it actually started with this. I'm just going to use it as an example. If you look at the art that used to be like by Larry Elmore, it had a very distinct flavor. It was very detailed. It was really beautiful. You look at something like Boris Vallejo, who is one of the more famous artists in the 80s and 90s. Um, the women were all very muscular, mainly because he used female bodybuilders in his art a lot. Um, and then people, you get women, mostly women. I shouldn't say just women, but there are a lot of men who do it now too. But they start complaining that, well, the women are too sexualized. They don't seem to care that the men are sexualized, just the women.
I need my
But
hot gay soundboard blurb here.
um, but they tried to basically soften all of the things people found offensive, and what you end up with is kind of bland art. And then people decided they were going to get offended about orcs and drow. So, well, we have to redo those. And then people were offended by the idea of evil. So we have to do away with that. And what you end up with is literally there are now magazines about how to run a Dungeons and Dragons game where you start a business instead of go adventuring.
Which kind
Because,
of would seem where the whole thing falls apart, because if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of seems like D&D's entire thing when it actually functions, which is going out and running an adventure.
right. I mean, that's the whole point is, you go into dungeons, you kill things, you steal treasure. Um, but, then you get into like, oh, well, that's promoting, colonization behavior.
Oh yeah.
Um,
So as I understand it, and I correct me if I'm incorrect in my my statement here, but as I understand it, D&D kind of jumped the shark quite a while ago, um, into going down the intersectional route with the way it approaches stories and writing. And from what I've heard, they did a bunch of stuff like getting rid of half races because those are supposedly racist. Um, Getting rid of
Which is very strange because first of all, if you're going to call them races and not species, then they should in fact be able to produce together.
mm-hmm.
And when you look at real life interracial stuff, banning interracial children used to be one of the most racist things you could do.
Yes, yes. There
So
was
it's a very strange way to look at it that, like, oh, we can't do this anymore.
yeah, there was a point where in America there was an entire term for that, which I will not use because I think YouTube will get angry at me if I do. But
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing, like I heard about that whole hubbub around when it was happening, and I was just like, wait, whoa, hold up there, because I have quite a few friends who are whose parentage is from people who occupy different sections of the crayon box, and I think they
Mm-hmm.
would probably find that rather offensive. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, so my I have a cousin who is black, and let me tell you, no one is more furious about the orcs are black people thing than he is.
Yeah,
Because his whole thing is
I've
like,
talked
that's
about
what
that.
you think I look like?
I've talked about that on the channel before because I am a very big fan of J.R.R. Tolkien's world. And as you
Mhm.
know, Lord of the Rings makes a certain subsect of humanity very angry. And they go off and make wild assertions like, orcs are black people, or the Haradrim are, insert group here, or that recent thing that happened with the retard over in England, the retard professor who was like, um, the Numenorians are just the perfect people, whereas everyone else is shown as like barbaric savages. I'm like, have you read the Silmarillion? Do you know what the Numenorians did to
Yeah, I was gonna
entire
say, I
subsections of
think
the
that
setting?
I I think that is not correct.
Because if you read for the people in chat who don't know, if you read Lord of the Rings' history and the Silmarillion, um, the Numenorians by the end of their kind of kingdom are doing stuff like running massive amounts of slavery, human sacrifice, just worshiping dark gods, just tons of just generally not nice things. So that assertion is very, very flawed.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. It's just,
please continue.
people. I was just gonna say, like, people are gonna do what they're gonna do, and they're gonna believe what they want to believe. But when you try to, the whole saying, you can make everyone happy some of the time, or some of the people happy all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
When you try and make all of the people happy all of the time, nobody's gonna be happy.
Yeah. I mean, if you like if you like, for example, I really like Warhammer 40k. I like the flavor of Warhammer 40k. I like the fluff. I'm a big fan of the lore. I've read a lot of the books. If you read the older stuff, if you read like Gotrek and Felix or Caiaphas Cain or the earlier Eisenhorn stuff, and you compare it with modern Warhammer Age of Sigmar or modern 40k, you can definitely tell where they have taken a rasp to all the hard edges of the setting and just gotten rid of everything that was. They've gotten rid of all of the zang in the setting. Like, all of the taste is gone. It's kind of just gray gruel now. If you read, for example, Gotrek and Felix is not Gotrek and Felix anymore because at the end of the end times, Felix got killed. Spoilers.
Mhm.
Gotrek now has his own set of stories in Age of Sigmar, and it is it's very sad to read because you're reading through it and the character is acting out of sorts from how he would usually act. All of the
Mhm.
characters are very, very modern, um, and very.
Yeah, it drives me crazy when they put modern slang into something that's supposed to be medieval.
Okay, well, now you got me started. Okay, so we're gonna talk about Rogue Trader and Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous. So I played Owlcat Games' adaptation of Rogue Trader. Okay, I like
Okay.
that game a lot. Owlcat's adaptation of Rogue Trader, awesome. Would recommend to everyone. You should probably check it out. Like, it's really well written. It's got good characters. Its mechanics are very solid for a CRPG. Um, there's a lot that's really good about it. But then I went back and played one of their older games, which is an adaptation of Pathfinder. And the writing is the thing that bit me. Because you get into it and it goes from, Rogue Trader's writing, oh, thank you, Yarny, for the raid. Much appreciated.
We got a Yarny raid?
Yes. Um, awesome. Thank you very much. Hope you recover well from the Hump Day Chinwag. By the way, chat, go check them out. They're very cool.
They have apparently ended, though.
Yes. That man is never going to invite me on. Probably fair after what happened the last time. Anyway,
Actually, he made a note today that he's looking for a couple of people next month, and if anyone would like to come on, to please contact him.
but the writing in Pathfinder is just completely different because everyone talks like they're contemporary. Like, it's like fantasy setting, fantasy characters, but everyone speaks in a very contemporary manner. It's like the difference between watching a show like Deadwood or HBO's Rome and then watching like one of the modern shows where everyone just talks contemporary. Like they talk like they just walked out of a Starbucks in downtown Portland. You're like,
Yeah.
Ugh. I really don't like that at all.
I mean, if it's a fanciful, like, when they remade Battlestar Galactica, obviously they couldn't swear because it was supposed to be a family-friendly show mostly. But I loved the fact that what they did was say, oh, well, this is kind of like alternate humanity, and therefore what's a swear to them is close to us, but not exactly. Like, I thought that was an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, they do the same thing in a lot of the modern 40K and older 40K stuff. Like they use a lot of very creative swear words that are similar but not the same, and thus they can get it past the censors.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, if you pay attention, chat, when we're streaming Dark Tide, they'll use terms like Karker, which is their stand-in for the F-bomb, which is it's something I appreciate. I actually like it when settings have their own in-universe stuff because it makes it seem separate from our own reality in a way. It's very different from just a character suddenly out of nowhere dropping fuck it.
Well, and I think that kind of goes into what I was saying earlier about trying to please everyone. The result is you end up with games that don't have any history because, history tends to be kind of messy and that results in possibly offending people.
Yes.
And so you end up with these very flat worlds that don't feel real because they don't have any depth. They don't have any historical. Grim Jim did a video a while ago about the importance of having history and the fact that you don't have to spell out your history. You can just add little touches here and there. But that if you don't have any history for your world, it ends up feeling thin.
Yeah.
It ends up feeling like, you've just a thin coat of paint over nothing.
What I like to refer to as cotton candy. It tastes great in the moment, like when you first get it, but afterwards you're kind of just sitting there with sticky fingers, and you're like, I just literally ate nothing. You know, this had
Yeah, I mean,
no nutritional value.
and this is probably why it's so hard for, games to stay together, and you end up with a lot of one shots. And people say, they have these characters with like 20-page backstories, and they say, well, it's so I can become invested in my character. Well, it's where you go with a character that causes you to get invested in them.
Mm-hmm.
If you've already written the story, well, you wrote a story and you should, submit it to a magazine or something. It's the development of the story that makes the game worth playing.
Uh-huh. I would largely agree with that. I mean, a good backstory can provide motivations for a character, um, and it can provide like a direction for where you kind of want the character to go, or a
Oh,
reason for why
absolutely.
the character is the way they are. But when you have people who you run into what I like to refer to as the George R. R. Martin problem, where all the interesting shit happened before the main thrust of the story, and you're kind of stuck with a character that's had all of their coolest shit back in the ye olden times, you know, before you actually get to, take the toy out of the box and play with it, which is kind of a problem with a lot of modern fantasy authors tend to do this, where they think they're Tolkien, and so they're like, oh, well, I'll just write this very extensive backstory for insert universe here, and then they make the modern world of their setting, or the setting for which their story is taking place, just incredibly boring in comparison. And you're just like, yeah, but I'd rather read about that stuff though. You
Um, well, and like I said, I think it tends to be more true of people who want to game master than people who want to play. Um, but you do hit that certain type of person that what they really want to do is write, but they don't either have the belief in themselves that they can write, or they don't have the attention span, or they're just too lazy. Um, they And so what they do is they like write up backstories that people are going to have to listen to. Um, and I don't quite know how to phrase this that isn't going to sound crueler than I mean it to. Um, the story in their head has already happened, and they don't really have any interest in anything else. Um, because they've written what it is they wanted to write. Whereas if you, like you said, if you have a general motivation, okay, my character comes from a wealthy, noble family, but they're, I'm a fourth son. I really don't mean anything to the family. I won't inherit anything, but all I've known is a life of luxury. And now my brother has taken the throne, so I'm not really wanted. And I now have to make my way in the world and try and figure out, how to deal with normal people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like 3 sentences,
Mm-hmm.
but it gives you a great way of, okay, this is how I'm going to interact with the world around me. And it's where you go from there. It's the development of how do you interact with people? How do you find your place in the world? How do you earn your brother's respect? What will your role be in this world now that there's really no other place for you, and you don't really have any skills?
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that completely. So my brain doesn't completely turn to mush. Out of curiosity, what do you like? We're going into like RPG design here, so let me ask you this: what do you find most appealing, like in an RPG? Like in its like in if you had to pick a mechanic or a set of mechanics you like most, what do you find most appealing?
Um, the problem is I edit a lot of different types of role-playing games, and I run and play a lot of different types. Most people kind of have a niche. They like sci-fi, or they like cyberpunk, or they like fantasy. Um, I regularly run 5 different games. I occasionally run another 5 after that. I play at least 5 more, and I edit a ridiculous number. So my tastes are a lot more varied than most people's. Um, and it very much depends on the game. Um, I think it's easier to tell you what I don't like. And what I don't like are mechanics that don't fit. The number of people that hand me games and say, I wanted to write something that's not 5e, but what they really have done is taken 5e and thrown in a bunch of extra rules it doesn't need. Or you take a game that they call rules light, but it's 600 pages long.
Hmm.
Um, I tend
Those
to
two would
not
seem
like.
rather incongruous.
Yeah, exactly. Um, what they mean is that it's easy. It is not a difficult game to learn. It's not what I would call crunchy. It's not mathematically heavy. Um, but it's not rules light.
Hmm.
And I think the problem is that most people think you have to have a game that's either one or the other. Whereas sometimes you can just have a rules heavy game, but that is not terribly difficult to learn. Um, but those are kind of few and far between because everybody's gotten into this habit of you have to either be crunchy or rules light. Um, though I do love the fact that somebody the other day described their game to me as crunchy light. I love the
Ah.
comment. Rules light drops the Library of Congress on the table. See?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. I would say Aerodale is probably correct there. And thank you once again
I,
for being here, my glorious mod.
yeah, I was gonna say your mod is very funny. I like them a lot. Um,
He's my older brother, so if you like my personality, you like his a lot more because I'm kind of just the shitty knockoff version. Um,
I I don't know that being siblings has anything to do with that because I have a younger brother and we are nothing. We have nothing in common except the fact that we both really like role playing games. Interestingly,
nice.
um, yeah, he's far smarter than I am, um, but he's less good at faking extroversion than I am.
Mm,
Um, he's sort of good at all the things I'm not good at, and vice versa.
uh-huh. Yeah. Well, that
Um,
means you can kind of, you can kind of rotate the shields there on the ship, so to
well, I
speak.
have so to give you a good example, I have dyscalculia. I have a very difficult time with numbers, not just mathematically, but they literally, fives become eights in my head and all that sort of stuff. Um, he, on the other hand, is 5 years younger than me and could do my mathematical homework when he was in kindergarten.
Oh, okay. He and I are starting to sound a little similar. Yeah, I kind of did the same thing for my older brother. Although he's only 18 months older than me, but back when we were like, first like getting into school and stuff, he'd be like, I have no idea what this means, and I'm like, that's that, and that, and that, and oh, you should probably divide that by this.
Yeah, my brother and my mother are both very mathematically inclined, and so the fact that I have a learning disability specifically in math really was, especially since I did not get diagnosed until I was in well, I got sort of semi-diagnosed before grad school. Um I was gonna have to take some testing to go to grad school, and I went to get a tutor, and I was like, I need to like brush up on this whole math thing. And the guy who was running the adult ed program,
Yes, Aradale would like to
assured,
point out that it was a different older brother. I am the youngest of 6 kids and five boys, so, you know, other older brother. The one I affectionately refer to as the older younger brother. That one.
But anyway, he looked at me and he's like, "You're not just bad at math." He's like, "You've got something else going on." He's like, "'Cause you did beautifully until you hit a certain point, and then you just came to a screeching halt." I'm like, "Yep, that's my life."
Okay, now we're starting to sound similar here because I had the same thing happen with me with algebra. But
Yeah,
back
it's
to topic.
actually, yeah, back to topic.
Back to topic.
Sorry, the psychology history in me, it like finds the whole how the brain works thing fascinating. So
yeah. I have kind of the same problem where I'll just go off on random shit for an hour and a half, like, you know, this happened like 12 years ago when I was up doing that one job for in fucking where was it? When we were tearing down the house. Chat, help. Never mind. But yeah. Like, if I could get back to shit, brain.
So we were talking about the things that I like mechanics wise.
Yeah.
I am also a little weird in the fact that I like to run very complicated things. I like to play not necessarily light things, but funny things, which tend to be the lighter games. Paranoia is my exception. I like to run and play Paranoia. And that is very rules light. Like I said, I don't have an issue with the mechanics in 5th edition D&D, you know, the general D20. But I don't like the setting, and honestly, D20 just gets kind of boring after a while. Like, you can only do so much with it. I like finding a new mechanic that works really well. I love that because it's pretty rare these days. Yeah, my favorite thing is finding new mechanics that work well. My least favorite thing is people who add in extra mechanics they don't actually need.
Yeah.
For no particular reason except to make their game seem cooler.
Mm-hmm.
When what it does is make it harder.
Yeah.
I don't mind crunchy, but let there be a reason for the crunch.
That sounds
Otherwise,
like a motto to live by.
Otherwise, you've just overcooked your game.
So, you say you run a lot of games yourself. Out of curiosity, what are you playing right now? Like mostly.
What am I playing right now?
Playing and or running games of right now.
Playing, so normally I couldn't answer this because I have not played a game in a very long time. But I am actually just starting to play Alpengard, which is probably the best fantasy game, like pure high fantasy game I've run across in a really long time.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. Define high fantasy, because this is something that bothers me a lot. People say high fantasy, and what they actually mean is sword and sorcery in some cases. So, are you talking like high fantasy,
no,
high fantasy, or
sword and sorcery tends to be all humans. It tends to be fairly low magic, even though it's got the word sorcery in it. Whereas high fantasy tends to have things like other races.
Okay.
Magic tends to be far more common. It's often more of an alternate world. Like sword and sorcery can be.
Thank you.
George Martin-esque, like kind of our world. Tolkien is the exception. Tolkien did take a lot from Western mythology, but from Western mythology, not from like the actual real world culture.
Yes.
Um, whereas George Martin took a lot of stuff from actual cultures.
Let's be real. What George R. R. Martin did is he grabbed the War of the Roses, slapped a fantasy skin on top of it, and was like, "Here you go." Basically, that's the human component of it. The fantasy component of it is actually like
But I mean, there is some magic involved. I mean,
there
you have
there's
zombies,
there is you've got the ice
but it's
zombies, you
much.
got the others, you've got all the other stuff. I
I
had
think in
to.
general, sword and sorcery is grittier too.
Yes. So sword and sorcery. I define sword and sorcery. I put like a lot of modern fantasy into like two-ish camps. You have like modern high fantasy, which is largely derived from Tolkien's like, elves, dwarves, lots of magic, different races, stuff like that. And then you've got George R. R. Martin, who's more drawing from he's not Martin and Tolkien are very different because Martin isn't drawing from mythology as much as he is like older fantasy authors. He's drawing from Robert E. Howard. He's drawing from
Yeah, I was gonna say Conan is probably the example of sword and sorcery.
yeah, he's drawing a ton from Robert E. Howard, some from Michael Moorcock, though I haven't read Elric enough to be able to say that Elric is sword and sorcery. Um, and it's drawing a lot more from like H.P. Lovecraft. Like there's a lot in Martin's work. Like if you read about like what's underneath Old Town or you know the Seven Forts of ET. It's literally just ripping straight out of H.P. Lovecraft's work, like basically page for page.
Interesting. Lovecraft is the one thing I had not noticed as a
Yeah,
probably because most people think of Lovecraft as monsters and tentacly things, and
yeah, most people think cosmic horror and they're like, "Oh, it means pissed off calamari." They don't like it's the thing now, chat, I am going to be nice here and throw you a free resource. All of H.P. Lovecraft's and well, I think all of it and a good bit of Robert E. Howard's like Conan, Solomon Kane, Cull, a lot of that is actually free. You can go get it off of Project Gutenberg. So, there's a free resource for you.
yeah, most of Lovecraft stuff is in public domain now.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Though the Lovecraft Society will try and argue with you about it if you actually write something. They are notoriously lawsuit happy.
yeah, it's kind of like when the Tolkien Society tried to go after one dude for just posting a piece of art that they did not own the rights to.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
So anyway, if my terminology is acceptable to you,
it is. It is acceptable.
then Elpengard is definitely high fantasy. I am playing a faun. It's different so first of all, it's a D30 system.
Okay, explain to me how that's different from D&D.
Uh,
Or just basically outline what the system is in the simplest way you can. If that won't take too long.
Well, I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to do it. So current edition D&D is D20. And the D20 is based on your stats are between 1 and 20, and based on how high the number is, you get a bonus. So then when you have to make a check, you roll a D20, you add the bonus, and you have to get higher than a certain number. So there are several steps involved. The D30, and then you have to do things like every weapon does a certain different type of damage, and then you may have bonuses to that damage as well. There's math. The Alpengard system is similar, but it runs on a D30 system. You do not have like it's not like you have an attribute of 15 and that gives you a +3 bonus, and the +3 bonus is what you add. It's literally you have a 3 in whatever skill it is you're rolling, period. So it takes that
Okay.
extra step out. It also, it's more in depth in a lot of ways. So you don't just have, 6 attributes and that's what everything falls under. There's a lot more variety in skills and capability. I mean, you do still have attributes and skills. That's kind of basic for a lot of games.
Yeah.
But because there are a lot of different species involved and a lot of different types of situations involved, it's also more cinematic. You have specific, they're called pneuma,
Okay.
that you can spend pneuma to literally do cinematic things. So it's not just I roll to hit them with my axe every single time.
It's I roll
You
to
get
hit them with my axe in a specific pattern, or like
um I'm trying to think of a good example. So it was not for that game. It was for a different game. But I played a one shot of a different cinematic type game. And I could not cross the room and attack to save my companion in time. But I could spend my points, my cinematic points, to rush across the room with my head lowered because I had one of those stupid helmets with the the horns on it.
okay, those are cool actually, but yeah.
Um, and in this particular world, it didn't belong. But like that whole example of like being a younger lord that doesn't really fit, like that is it. That's what I was playing.
Okay.
And so I was a lord dressed like they thought an adventurer should dress, as opposed to
How they
practical
actually
and
should dress.
right. And so my it was like the equivalent of going into Texas cow country, wearing really stereotypically cowboy gear instead of like just blue jeans and boots and a hat. um and you just screamingly stand out as a tourist.
Yes.
um so in this particular case, I had on a helmet that had horns, which was my version of making me stand out like a tourist.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to save my companion. And since I couldn't get in a proper attack, I literally just charged in with my head lowered, um, slammed myself into a wound that they had in their side, and in doing so, put myself between the monster and the breath weapon that they were about to blow onto my companion.
Okay. So that that
Um,
that that kind of answers my question. It's not just the here roll a 1d, I don't know, 6 to hit, and if you hit, you
yeah,
smack him
no,
with your axe.
it,
It's an actual like full strand of here you can do this thing, and this thing in this order. If you choose to spend these particular points.
it's not even a this thing, and this thing, because literally, in order to spend cinematic points in most games that have that mechanic, you have to describe in detail what you're doing. You can't just say, I hit him with my axe. You have to say, I take a mighty swing, putting everything I've got into that one moment, um, and I cleave his head from his body and bathe myself in his spouting blood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it has to be like that kind of intense detail. It's great for people who are kind of shy and want to learn how to role play because you can't wallflower.
Yeah.
Um, it just, kind of makes you have to come out of your shell a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, cinematic games can be fun. I like Alpengard a lot. He's put a lot of work into it. It's really good. A lot of times I find the cinematography aspect is just there to kind of cover up flaws in the system. And they're very frequently they frequently make the game too complicated. Like there's one game where there is an entire separate set of rules for if you're doing something cinematic versus if you're doing a regular attack. And there's really no need for it. Again, it's just extra mechanics for the sake of mechanics, and because they couldn't figure out how to make everything work the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But
So like
so I am
everything else in
playing.
life, it's in the execution of how it's actually like put into the game.
Um, yeah, it's it could have been simplified.
Yeah.
The particular game I'm thinking of, but um, that game is also a very fun game to play. But I don't think I could ever do more than a one shot because that would start to irritate me after a while.
Yeah.
I have a hard enough time with all the games I run and play remembering what the rules are. And if you have two sets of rules in one game, that's going to start to get real hard.
That piques my interest a little bit. Two sets of rules for one game. I'm kind of afraid
Yeah,
to ask.
if you're doing a regular skill check or attack roll, you have one set of rules. If you are doing a cinematic action, there is a totally separate set of rules for that attack.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, and also that seems very, very complicated.
Too complicated. Yeah, exactly. Um, and it's a shame because the world is really neat, and I've had the couple of one shots I've done have been great fun. But like I said, I don't think I could ever do anything terribly long term. I think it would drive me crazy.
Mm-hmm. So, like, what games are you running right now?
I am running two different games of Shadow of the Demon Lord. I was running two games of Numenera. Both of them, by coincidence, have gone on hiatus for the moment. One of them I may be restarting completely because we just seem to be able to line times up, and we weren't very far into it. So I may actually end up just starting that one over with a new members to replace the ones that can't make it. And let's see, I am running one Shadow Dark game, which is, let's see, is there anybody in your chat that's playing in that game? Doesn't look like it. I am, okay, sorry, I had to double check myself. It is basically the Odyssey, but done with Vikings.
Shadow Dark is.
Nope, the specific game I'm running.
Okay. So, the Odyssey, but with Vikings.
Yes.
Um, hmm.
Um, it's a sea voyage. Vikings spent a lot of time at sea.
True. True. See, now you're
Um,
starting to get into something I am actually very interested in because I like a lot of Norse mythology, like that Norse slash Anglo-Saxon mythology, so I find that kind of thing interesting. Um,
yeah, Shadow Dark does not specifically call them Vikings. It calls them sea wolves, I think, if I remember correctly.
yeah,
But
one of my favorite like PC RPGs is Elder Scrolls, and they don't call their Vikings either. They call them the Nords. Very original, I know. Um, but they're very Viking-esque in the way they function.
yeah,
It's pretty cool.
yeah, the gods are pretty much all the same. I think it's just so that you couldn't get somebody who came along and said, well, actually, Vikings really did.
Well, actually,
Yeah, exactly. So by calling them sea wolves, the answer just becomes, well, they're not Vikings.
not Vikings. Yes.
Um, it's like Sorry but Not Sorry, Vikings but not Vikings.
Mm-hmm. It is the, this is a fictional setting that I made up. Now, please, stop bugging me about, putting in the specific thing that you want from history. The
Yep.
Imperial Legion does not use Lorica armor. They're gonna use plate because they're the Imperial Legion, they're not the Roman legions. Please relax. You know.
I have been granted the capability to be a playtester for a new game that's not out yet called Dead Man Walking, which is basically a murder mystery that takes place kind of in the semi-modern day West, but with a little bit of an Old West feel. Um,
I like a
and
good
then,
Western.
Hmm?
I like a good Western.
Yep. And then I, I do one shots whenever I have the time, kind of thing. Um, I did, uh, I did a Slay Industries one shot not that long ago. Um, I'd kind of like to follow that up with a part 2 at some point in the near future. Let's see, what else have I done recently? There hasn't been a whole lot of time recently. I've got a whole backlog of things I'm planning on doing, but my brother backed Huckleberry for me for Christmas. I kept whining about the fact that I was really upset I couldn't afford to back it. So he's backing it for me for Christmas.
Based brother.
Um, hmm?
Based brother.
Yes, exactly. I was like, this is the only thing I am asking for that is not something we need. This is the only thing that I want. Which is, of course, not true. There are a ton of other games I would absolutely love to have, but
Yeah.
um,
The ever present problem of someone who's like, a fan of anything. It's like, this is really cool and it's coming out really soon and I really want it, but if I get it, then I won't be able to get the other thing I really need to like actually play. But I want to play it because it's
I
really
mean,
cool. I'm having
I
that
mean,
kind of problem right now.
my life these days is more like I need, as in, I need to not freeze to death.
Yes, yes, that
Um,
is a very very important one to have. You're like,
so
I would,
priorities,
I'd really like to buy that, but I should
but
only really
priorities,
be
yeah.
buying. I should really only be buying things with disposable income, and right now I need to be spending that on doctor bills.
Yep,
Or insert this here.
yep.
Or oh
Yeah,
god, the truck broke down for the ninth time this month.
I uh, I was all excited today because we finally got heating oil for the first time since last February.
Nice.
So
So I am gonna go slightly off RPG topic here because I'm curious.
sure.
What kind of goats do you have?
I have two different kinds. I have Oberhassis and I have San Clemente Island goats, which are one of the rarest goat in the world.
Okay. Have you ever had sheep? And do you have
I
sheep?
I do have sheep. I have Soe, which are the first sheep in history that were domesticated for wool production.
I actually know about those. Um, my mom was very into like fiber arts and that kind of thing for a very long time, still is. Um, and she got like really into like historical breeds and stuff. For a long time, we had Jacob sheep,
I
and
have a friend 2 towns over that has Jacobs. They are wonderful.
they are assholes. Or at least ours were. Ours were assholes. I can't
They
speak for
are
anyone
they are
else.
they are definitely they definitely have intense personalities.
That's a very nice way of putting it. My personal experiences,
Did they escape?
after my experience, no, well, habitually, but they're usually pretty easy to get back in. And it's not like the thing with Jacobs is we kept ours in electric fence, like electric netting fence, so they would
Mhm.
just it works on like everything else. Like we had like other types of wool sheep and we keep them in just fine. They wouldn't ever basically like even try to get out because they always have enough food, they always have enough water. Jacobs would just get out because they could.
Yep.
Like, just no other reason. Like, literally no other reason. Just because they could. And
Yeah, Steph has the same problem.
the big problem with them was, so Jacobs have 2 to 6 horns.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally. Now, they can have a lot more than that. Like, they can have up to, like, 8. I know a chick who had, I think, a herd who had a ram with, like, 12. Yeah, pretty insane. But we had one that one day we went off to go to church, as you do on Sunday. We come home, and one of them had literally killed himself because
Yeah,
he'd
that's why I
gotten
don't.
all of his horns wrapped up in it and basically just like strangled / electrocuted himself to death. Which it was like, what? It was the most random shit. You're like, there's literally no reason to. Like, none. You have everything you need right there. Why can't you just not? And so we stopped using that type of fence because it was like, we can't.
I was gonna say it's why I don't use electric fencing.
Yeah, we switched over to something else, and that worked for a long period of time, but it was just the most. It's just the most random, like, annoying thing. Like, it was also sad because I really liked that sheep a lot when he wasn't being an asshole. But you're like,
Mm-hmm.
why can't you
I'm
just be
sure it made
normal?
perfect sense to him at the time.
Why can't you just be normal? But yeah, so yeah, we've kept a lot of animals over the years. We've had goats, we've had sheep. I like cows and pigs the best. Like, of all the animals we've kept over the years, pigs are amazing. Like,
I do like pigs, but I don't eat pork, and so my husband won't let me have any because they wouldn't be useful for anything.
I mean, you could always sell them, but well, pigs are good for. I like we will smoke our own bacon and stuff in the winter, like that kind of thing. Gonna have to butcher later this probably this next coming month. Um, but pigs are good because pigs are smart. Like, they're not too smart, but they're smart enough to know that they have food, they have water, um, they have all the
Did you
stuff they
just
want.
say they're not too smart?
They're not too smart.
They are literally the smartest livestock animal out there.
Um,
They've done testing. They are literally the average. Dumb pigs are as smart as the average 8-year-old.
mm. See, this is where we
And
get.
they can and they can work in teams. They can literally problem solve and work together to solve problems in pairs.
Now that I've seen, I would make some arguments for the occasional, like, frighteningly intelligent chicken, um, but those are once again the exception, not the rule. Um,
I do have to say the Soe are disturbingly smart.
oh yeah.
But they can't do teamwork, which is why I'm still willing to eat them.
Mm. Pigs, our pigs don't usually do teamwork. They're just more along the lines of just generally being very happy to see the man with a large pail of compost or, food. Um, but the thing for me, like, I like pigs a lot because pigs are just generally pretty chill. Cows are great for another reason. Cows are milk and food, and you need them to be. And the other thing with cows is if you keep cows for any period of time, they like kind of get to know you. And so if they ever for any reason, like, a couple of years back, we had them get out due to we had a really bad winter storm that came through and, like, knocked over fence and everything the hell else. Like, it got so cold here, we had, like, trees exploding and stuff, so, like, stuff was coming down on random neighbors' houses. But the process of putting them back in was literally just, walk outside and everyone comes running, So that's kind of why I like cows. Cows are good. Not to mention, cows are generally sweet. Now, that there is an exception to that rule. We had one called Blossom, which we refer to lovingly as the homicidal bovine. If an animal can be evil, I'm pretty sure she was. Like, and I mean like actually devious. Like she would wait until people like when the general rule was just don't go into her enclosure, like don't mess with her unless you have to because she's kind of grumpy. But she would like wait until people like got out into the middle of, for whatever reason you have to go in there and check something. She'd wait till you were out in the middle of the pasture and then come and try and gore you to death. um she was
Seems
insane.
perfectly seems perfectly reasonable to me.
Yeah, yeah, but just not a lot of fun when you're like 12 and told to go, hey, get that bucket or piece of trash that blew in from over on the neighbors, but yeah, ugh, yeah, that one was gnarly. Oh, and there was like, so the thing is, like, she had a broken off horn from before we got her, and she had the look of like a complete psycho. Like you look into her eyes, you look into most cows' eyes, it's very placid, not a whole lot going on up there. You look into her eyes and it's just pure hatred.
Wonder if that's the same thing that caused her horn to break off.
Possibly. Uh quite possibly. But yeah, back to topic. Rabbit trail. Back to topic.
That's all right. I can talk about animals as easily as I can talk about games.
So for someone who's like just getting into like RPGs or TTRPGs, what would you recommend?
I would ask questions first. I would ask if they had a genre in mind. Um, I would ask if they were more interested in. Well, I would start with genre because I think the questions would have to go from there. If somebody tells me science fiction, then I'm going to follow up with like pure space sci-fi or something like cyberpunk,
Yeah,
or
are
something
we
post-apocalyptic.
the problem with a lot of like the problem with asking people what genre they want is then you have to ask like all the qualifiers because there's a lot of genres within genres. You have a lot of science fantasy, like you have the more Star Wars esque settings, and then you have and I'm using Star Wars. I know a lot of people in my chat are like, that's not the only science fantasy setting you know. I'm like, yeah, but it's the one everyone else does. Um, Star Wars compared to something like The Expanse, um, or something that's a lot harder and crunchier, or Cyberpunk in comparison to what's the one RPG system? I think it's owned by the same people that do BattleTech. Um, the one where it's
I
like
mean,
urban fantasy.
uh, I mean that there's a lot of options there. And that's the issue. That's why I would start with something like that, even though it's going to lead to qualifiers, is because if somebody's willing to try something other than D&D, I want to make sure that whatever it is they're trying is something they're going to enjoy. Um, I am totally convinced that role playing to me is like books. If you think you don't like it, it's just because you haven't found the right one. But it's so rare that you can get people to try even a game that I want to make sure that whatever they try is going to be a good time. Um, so I'm gonna like do the qualifiers. Um, you
Okay,
know,
so
uh,
let me just throw this out there. Um, what would you suggest for someone who likes fairly high fantasy settings? Okay, doesn't really want doesn't really want filed off fantasy if they can get it. Wants something that's fairly gritty and and is not like something that's more like Tolkien-esque and not just everyone has magic, everyone's throwing magic around all the time. Like, what would you recommend for that?
um, so high fantasy, but not constant magic.
Mm-hmm.
and gritty. I think Elpengard would work with the right game master. Because gritty is kind of a thing you can add. I think Shadow Dark would work well, period. It tends to be very old school, you know, danger is quite real, and that just automatically will make things a bit grittier, just by its nature. I mean, if you're willing to deal with the possibility of really gritty and, you know, dying quickly, I think Shadow Dark is probably the best one. If you want something a little more gritty and cinematic, I think Elpengard is good. Everybody has magic in D&D these days. I suppose you could do an older edition of D&D.
That's what I've heard, largely.
Yeah, like I said though, I still think the older editions have their issues. THACO is ridiculous. Like there's no reason for you need to have like advanced algebra to play a game.
You shouldn't have to crank out the supercomputer just to, get across
I
your
mean, you
stat
don't.
sheet.
They have charts, but it's still it's still a pain.
Now this isn't on my list, but I wanted to ask you this question as well. How do you feel about lethality in games as like a general rule? Because I know there are some DMs and game masters who just hate the concept of killing a character, and then there are other ones who are like, no, you're gonna die. Like where would you say you fall on that spectrum?
So I have a very specific rule as a game master when it comes to lethality. I do not kill characters. I will not stop characters from killing themselves. If you are going to do the dumb thing, I am going to let you do the dumb thing. I am not going to change the game so your dumb thing is not dumb.
In other words, the simple rule is don't be retarded.
It's not that necessarily, but there are things like if you are in an unknown dungeon where everything has attempted. Oh, here's a great example. I was running a Numenera game. Numenera also, by the way, would be a really fabulous for the person that is looking for a fantasy game, but that comes with caveats. So remind me, and I'll get back to that.
Okay.
They go into an area where they have specifically been told there is no clean water, there is no food, everything will attempt to kill you, and nobody gets out of here alive. They were asked what they wanted for supplies. They picked like 3 days of food and water. And one of the team members, they were busy trying to figure out, they found water and they were like, oh, like, can we drink this? And I said, well, it looks really sludgy and there's a weird sheen on the top and you can't see to the bottom. So one of them immediately sticks his arm in the water. It was like within 15 minutes of the game starting. And he lost his hand. Because, don't do that.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like your players there kind of had the self-preservation instincts of a manically depressed lemming.
I think in this particular case, I think he was a newer gamer. I think he just didn't really know. But the not newer gamers didn't tell him not to do it either. So nobody said, hey, that might be a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will say that it seems to me to be a no-brainer, you know. Every time somebody complains about in Prometheus that the scientist like poked the snake,
Oh God.
I think, I've met geeks and yeah, their first reaction to a lot of things seems to be I poke it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have my problems with that movie. There's a lot of other shit that's really retarded in there, but I think the whole poking the snake thing was probably one of the less unlikely things that would have happened. Because
Yeah, I mean when people say like, "Oh, no one is ever dumb enough to do that in a horror movie." I'm like, have you met people?"
yeah, I mean, a lot of horror movies use that as an excuse to do like lazy and stupid writing, but then
But I've met
again,
people.
I've met people who are just so I'm gonna tell a story here that's not mine, but it's one from Aridale actually. So if I remember correctly, he was out kayaking, and we were raised in the woods. So we're live middle of nowhere. We're raised around a lot of not so safe stuff, and we were taught from a very early age of like what you can mess with and what you can't. One of the things you can't mess with is and really shouldn't mess with is poison ivy because obviously.
Wait, somebody had to tell. Well, yeah, I forgot there were people that don't know what poison ivy looks like. Never
Okay.
mind.
Um, and Aridale came upon some people who were part of like the same like kayaking group who were picking these little white berries off of the poison ivy vine. And we're like, oh yeah, we're gonna like eat these. And he was like, what the fuck is the matter with you?
Mm.
And
You're not only not going to eat those.
you're gonna wash your hands very carefully. And then
Yeah.
I don't know what else. Get ready for a really bad rash in about a week.
Yeah, I am extra allergic to poison ivy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, ugh, even just thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I had to pull some off of a tree we were doing about a week and a half ago, and it flared off on my hands a little bit, but then it goes away in like a day or two. That's usually how
Mm.
bad it is for me. But then
Yeah,
occasionally, like
not
it'll
not
get
me.
like we have a sawmill too, so occasionally you'll get sawdust down in places where sawdust shouldn't go, and if it's a tree with poison ivy vines, that can prove to be a very rough week. Yeah,
I can imagine.
yeah, not fun. Not fun. Would not recommend. 0 out of 10. But I've
No,
noticed that a lot of people tend to be like, oh well, we can just do this because it's it's a video game or it's a it's a tabletop game. They're not gonna treat this seriously, and then you're like, yeah, but if you do that in real life, you're gonna get killed though.
I think there's a certain amount of like it's just a game, but there are people that just. So the first game I ever ran is a horror game called Cult.
Okay.
It is still one of my favorite games. It's hard to find people to play now though. Because it's kind of vicious. Um, However, dying in Cult does not automatically take you out of the game.
Oh, it's one
Um,
of those, isn't it?
well, the idea is that the line between reality and what we believe has become really thin. And so I used to say that there were like I would run what I called early cult and late cult. In early cult, you just get people who kind of wander into real things that might be able to, or weird things that might be able to be explained away somehow. And then later cult, like there are actively, gods and monsters walking around.
Mm-hmm.
And um, in the later cult, when you're kind of more awakened, depending on how the game has gone, I mean, literally the motto to the game is death is only the beginning. because everything around us is an illusion, and that includes death. So if you are awakened enough when this reality body is killed, it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Okay. That sounds actually somewhat similar in a certain way to Elder Scrolls, with certain characters in there, with the way the nature of that universe works, because it's complicated. But basically, in Elder Scrolls, there are a couple of characters who've been killed multiple times by people. And because of their awareness of the nature of how the universe works in that setting, um, killing their physical form doesn't do as much as it would for a normal person. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
this is an inconvenience temporarily.
Well, in some cases, not being able to die is actually like torture.
Yeah.
Um,
And then there are those cases.
I had a player that, thought he was going to be funny and get himself killed off, but he had an immortal character. And
That can lead
the
to,
result.
depending on the nature of the DM, I could imagine that could lead to some pretty rough experiences for a side player character.
Yeah, he was a quadriplegic in like 3 sessions. Um,
That'll
and
do
he
it.
said, I said I want a new character, and I said, "No, you're still alive. Can't have a new character." And he said, "But I can't do anything." And I said, "You'll heal eventually." He learned.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that would teach.
Games like that are wonderful for, people who start out as problem characters or
Yeah.
problem players.
The
Um,
what is kindly referred to by many of the people I watch as tiefling syndrome.
uh, I have not played with enough. Most of the people I play with are not tiefling material, shall we say.
Uh-huh.
Um, I suspect I suspect most people who would, how do I say this? The type of people who would like to play tieflings would probably not like my games.
Fair.
We'll put it that way. Um, Numenera, which I wanted to make sure to mention.
Okay.
So Numenera is very strange. I guess it would be counted as, it's not science fantasy because it's actually primarily fantasy. Um, the basis of the game is that it's our Earth, but it's our Earth after humanity has hit its technological peak 8 times and destroyed itself 8 times. So Numenera is the ninth world.
Okay.
And the ninth world is at medieval level technology.
Okay.
So you are basically playing a medieval setting with technology buried in the sand around you that is basically magical.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
I've
but
I've
it
read quite a few books with that as part of the premise. And it can be very
so
interesting.
yes, it's technically science fiction, but it's really not because the entire basis is that, with the exception of the Eon priests, everyone thinks that this stuff is magical or from the gods or um it's basically they
It's
think of it
basically
in
the
religion.
Arthur C. Clarke the Arthur C. Clarke quote of, to any sufficiently primitive society, any sufficiently advanced technology is magic or
Yeah,
indistinguishable from
exactly.
magic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fairly rare because anything you pick up might be magical, but you don't know what it does, and so it also might kill you just as easily.
Now that is something that I would like, because I as a general rule, when it comes to magic, I don't like a lot of magic systems.
Yeah,
Um,
I loathe magic.
if you've have you ever read any of Brandon Sanderson's like Mistborn books?
I haven't read the Mistborn. I've read the oh, what's the other major one that he's in the process of doing?
The Stormlight Archives?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I've not read those, but I have read the Mistborn books. And the problem I have with the Mistborn books is the magic in there is very ordered. It's got really hard rules about what it can and can't do. And it's not so much rules imposed upon magic by people, but it's like hard rules on what magic can and can't do.
Mhm.
And I don't like that. I prefer magic to be something that is,
You like chaos magic.
well, not necessarily. Like, it doesn't have to be Warhammer 40k, you use it wrong and it blows up in your face and, you get possessed by a demon or become a warp portal. But I prefer it when magic has repercussions if used poorly. Or used just nilly-willy. I prefer it if magic has... And I prefer it when magic is magical. I prefer it when magic does not... and is not constrained necessarily by people. I prefer it when the magic system, if you want to use that term, exists as something people have put rules around or erected rules around to protect themselves. Like the way we mess with, electricity or, our basic understanding of gravity, which is, hey, don't jump off of tall buildings without a parachute. Just as a general rule, don't do that. Don't jump out of the back of an airplane with, a cinder block tied around your legs. It's not going to end well.
So Shadow Dark is interesting. It does have kind of basic magic. But if you fail, you lose your spell for the rest of the day. So you can keep casting the same spell over and over again until you botch it, until you fail it. If you botch, if you roll a 1, you have to roll on the botch table. And so in Shadow Dark, the idea is that have you ever seen Pitch Black?
Pitch Black with
Yes, movie, Vin Diesel.
Yes, I have. I like it quite a lot, and I did a recommendation video for it, I think, at some point, possibly. Memory serves me correctly.
So the idea behind Pitch Black is that you have these monsters that kind of come out once it gets dark every X number of years. So in Shadow Dark, you have a similar type of idea. Monsters come out whenever it gets dark, but it's every day. So if you're not within like town limits and it gets dark and you don't have fire,
food.
a little bit like Don't Starve.
Mm-hmm.
You die.
Yeah.
Not necessarily instantaneously, but so one of the possible consequences for botching a spell is that for a certain radius, all light seems to function, including sunlight.
Ceases to function, or
it just does not. It will not enter that area.
Oh, I can see how that would be very, very bad.
So torches don't work, lanterns don't work, and the sun does not shine in that area. So you just have these occasional spots over this entire planet where people botch spells and rolled badly.
Oh.
And I am the kind of game master that would keep track of where everyone botched those spells and, like, bring it up again in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that would
You're playing a totally different party on a totally different mission, but hey, several characters ago, You had a wizard that botched a spell right here.
Yeah. And that is
When I
something I
ran
actually like quite a bit.
when I ran cult in my version of cult, I'm very big on like remembering things for future consequences. Um, one of the rules in my cult game was that you had curfew was at 10 o'clock, and anyone caught out after 10 was just shot on sight.
Hmm.
And I had a friend who used to say, "I love your setting, except for that part. That's ridiculous. Like, what would ever happen that would allow people to accept that, like, to accept a nationwide curfew?" So years later, they're playing an entirely different game, entirely different characters, entirely different everything. But it takes place before that first game. Um, what was he supposed to be doing? I don't remember. He was in a library, he was looking for information, and the people hunting him tracked him down, and he fled, and he ran into a building next door without paying attention to what the building was. Um, and he finally ended up defeating his opponent by escaping the building and just bombing the building to take this monster out.
Okay.
Um, except what he'd done was bomb the Chinese embassy. And I said the last thing you hear at the end of the game is it comes over the news, an attack against the Chinese embassy has taken place, and martial law has been declared until this crisis is over. From now on, there is a 10 o'clock curfew um, until we have found these dangerous terrorists. And he looked at me and he said, "Wait a minute. Are you telling me that this rule I have complained about for so long as to like what caused the 10 o'clock curfew was me?" I said, "Yeah, I didn't intend it, but it was really too good not to sneak in there." That was like 10 years after we started the first game. So that was a lot of fun. Um, but yeah, to answer your question, I think Numenera, Shadow Dark, um, or Elpengard are all good starts for somebody that likes high fiction. They're all very, very different games. Um, they all have different pros and cons. Numenera, I think, is interesting. I think it's a great game for people to learn on because it's probably the heaviest role play of the three. And I have come to the conclusion that people who learn mechanics first have a harder time learning roleplay than people who learn roleplay first and then learn mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons people tend to get into D&D and stick to it is because there's not a lot of roleplay anymore in D&D. It's a lot of, build. I don't even want to say build the character. It's, choose a character. From that point on, the most effective build is this thing. People will get mad if you pick anything else.
It's
And then
basically
just
the equivalent of you have to play the meta, and if you don't play the meta, you're a terrible person in a lot of video games. Kind of
uh
mentality that's infected
yeah, I
everything.
guess. I don't That's one of the reasons I don't tend to play video games with other people cuz
It
I'm
depends
the
on
person.
who you're playing with. Like you'll run into two types of people playing, like, for example, on this channel, we stream a lot of Space Marine 2 and Darktide. Really fun games. Love the hell out of them. Darktide, very very RPG like with the way the mechanics are. Like
Mhm.
mechanically, it's very complex, very interesting game. But you'll have a lot of people who, for example, I'm just gonna throw this out there, and anyone who's a dueling sword fan, I don't dislike you. It's okay. This is not a personal attack. But you have a lot of people who believe that the dueling sword in there is the best weapon, and anyone who doesn't run dueling sword is tearing down the team. Which
Um It's less that than the fact that so okay, the other one I should have added to this, except that it's kind of somewhere between high fantasy and sword and sorcery. It's probably closer to sword and sorcery, but it's also a great game for people to learn on. Is Shadow the Demon Lord. Um, people tend to look at Shadow the Demon Lord initially and say, well, you only have 4 character classes and you don't even get to choose your character class. This is terrible. I'm not going to like it. And then I point out to them that, well, you can choose your character class in Dungeons and Dragons, and it looks like you have a ton of options. But as soon as you've picked that character class, where you go from there is pretty well set. Like, you're basically not allowed to make any other choices. Even though it says, oh, you've got, 3 possible, oath patterns or, ranger patterns or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The more you develop the character, the less choice you actually get to make if you want a character that's going to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Shadow of the Demon Lord starts out with 4 character classes. But the further you go, the more choices you get to make. And by the time you hit the master level, there's something like 4,000 different possible combinations.
Okay, that's very cool, actually. So
Um,
I'm gonna go off a little bit on video games here, just a little bit, because this reminds me of something very similarly. Um, so have you ever seen anyone play or played Oblivion?
I've seen little bits of it.
Okay. So basically, the character creation
My
in there is
my take, with the exception of the old Diablo games, my take on video games is very much like my take on role-playing games. I tend to like the games nobody else has ever heard of.
yeah. So I'm gonna use Oblivion because that's the one everyone's heard of, but the one I would suggest you check out for like it's older. It's like Diablo era, like the first Diablo and Diablo 2 era. That I'd suggest you check out is called Daggerfall, and it's the Elder Scrolls 2. But I'm using Oblivion as an example because it's the same kind of thing. But what you can do in there is it allows you to choose from a set of like preset starting classes. You got your warrior, you got your ranger, you got all your typical
Mm-hmm.
dross. But then you have the ability to make custom characters
Mm-hmm.
and custom classes. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, the amount of variety that you can choose and the stuff you can do with attributes, because one of the big things that Elder Scrolls does that not many other franchises really do is you level up abilities by using them. So if you want to use, for example, acrobatics, you need to do a lot of acrobatic things to get that to a fairly high level.
Mm-hmm.
And even if all the rest of your abilities are kind of crap, you can be really good with acrobatics, and that can allow you to play the game in a very different way. Now that leads to some exploitation, of course, because it is a PC game, where you can do just kind of obscene stuff because they didn't put like a hard level cap on how high you could level a skill, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could get to the point where you're jumping over mountains and stuff,
Yeah,
or
see, that's ridiculous.
jumping over the entire map if you're if you just devote thousands of hours to that one skill, which no one does basically. Like that's something you have to artificially induce. Now, what you can do naturally in the game, like you can do that. That's like an example of an extreme case. But what you can do is you can make it to where your character is much faster than everyone else in the game. And because you leveled that skill specifically, well, now you're basically one of the best thieves in the game because you can get in and get out of a situation and play the game in a very different way to how you would play it if you'd stunk all of your abilities into fighting. In Daggerfall, your there are also abilities regarding like more diplomatic skills. Um, Depending on how much you use them, there's an ability you can gain to translate speech from several of the different races that exist in the world, like centaurs or giants or harpies, and
Mhm.
also like Daedra and like the little dragon dudes. And if you use those skills in specific dungeons with that specific monster type a lot, you can get it to where you can get good enough as basically a diplomat to where you can get out of most fights. Not all of them, but you can get out of most of them because you can talk your way out. And that's something you don't really see in a lot of modern games. Like those kinds of mechanics that allow you to play the game very differently is not really there. One game
Yeah,
I
I
was
have.
extremely pleasantly surprised by um, that made it to where you actually have a ton of options is Rogue Trader. Because I've played the game like all the way through twice and run like half a dozen other characters to a fairly high level. And every single time, like not just from a mechanics standpoint, because the mechanics are interesting enough in and of themselves, but from a like roleplay standpoint regarding the choices you can make, every single one has been different because there is that much variety and choice. And when everyone's over here like, oh, but Baldur's Gate 3 has half a dozen endings, and it's like, yeah, but 90% of them just boil down to a variation of the same thing. In Rogue Trader, they're very different. Like, very, very different. And I found that extremely interesting. And I'm kind of curious if that is something you see as much, like, in like traditional D&D or traditional role-playing games with how those run
Um,
usually. But
I think it depends. I think if you get, I think it depends mostly on the type of GM. If you get GMs that are running nothing but, let's say, pre-made Wizards of the Coast adventures, those are basically choose your own adventure books. Um, you pretty much have to do a certain set of things in order for anything to work.
mm-hmm.
Um, I well, I shouldn't say I never run pre-made adventures because I'm actually running one right now, but it's very rare. Um, because players will always want to do something that you didn't think of or that the game didn't think of, and I don't want to discourage that. It's one of the reasons I don't use safety tools.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big push about, everyone should run safety tools at their games, especially if they're doing horror stuff. And I always say I'm not doing that because I can tell you that I won't, I don't know, have spiders in my game, but I'm not going to tell you that somebody else at the table isn't going to bring that in, and I'm not going to stop them from being creative with how they play. Um, so if I run, I don't know, uh, I don't know, I'm going to pick Paranoia because for some reason it's the one at the top of my brain. If I run a game of Paranoia, um, and I might have the first 10 minutes of the game planned out. And after that, I'm just going to wing it. And so there are infinite number of ways that the game can run because it's going to be entirely based on what my players do. I ran the same session for two different groups. One of them just kind of didn't get anywhere and, failed at the mission and stumbled around a lot. The other group failed at the mission because that happens a lot in Paranoia. Came back with a workaround, killed the person who had hired them, and stole their identity because the person who'd hired them was like much further up the food chain than them. And so the game ended with them having utterly failed at what I gave them to do, but being in this like massively high position because they had stolen the identity of this other person.
Basically, I'm redefining the victory conditions on this particular.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, I have seen games of Paranoia where the mission was literally, I need you to change a light bulb. Uh, and everyone died horribly like 2 hours later.
Hmm.
Because that's the kind of game Paranoia is. Paranoia is one of the few games where you don't think you can anymore, but in older editions, you used to be able to die during character generation. But it was okay because you got 7 clones.
Hmm. That's
It's designed to be a very funny game where you have your particular mission, but then each individual person tends to have side missions. And there's also the fact that the only way that you can gain ranks is to find traitors. And the easiest way to find traitors is just to like frame your companions.
that
So the
sounds like
entire game,
this basically sounds like it's, Monopoly but for role-playing games. It's the thing. This is how friendships are broken, you know.
I mean, if you don't go into a game of Paranoia expecting that like somebody's going to backstab you at some point, you're in the wrong game. Because the entire point is it's just supposed to be funny. Um, I
Remember, boys and girls, it's not paranoia if they are out to get you.
yeah, exactly. Um, and the computer is your friend, and there are all sorts of mottos like, "Are you happy today?" Because being unhappy is a sign of a traitor, and happiness is mandatory. Did you ever play Portal?
Portal? Once or twice. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I have no idea why they didn't get sued because the entire like setup for Portal is basically paranoia. You live
Okay.
underground. You are ruled over by a completely insane computer, um, who is not necessarily malicious, but is incredibly like one-track mind thinking,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and paranoid,
Yeah.
and so has cloned an entire society of beings that are incredibly paranoid. It used to be kind of a parody. Now it's considered more of a satire, and I like the way the current edition runs.
But you prefer
But I
how the
think
older editions are written?
I think the game has begun to take itself too seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
The entire point of Paranoia used to be don't ever take anything seriously. Um, but now it's become like, oh, we don't discuss these certain things because I don't know, just because they don't. Um, though they still, make references to commie traders, which I find entertaining because you'd think if they were worried about offending people, it would start there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But then again, I'm not sure how far I can go on this because my personal opinions tend to make certain people uncomfortable. But you always get the well, say that's just like satirizing the other side. Those kinds of people who are like, don't you understand that this is poking fun of you types. So you get the
I mean,
occasional.
the thing I find funny is that almost all of the times that people say, "Oh, this is poking fun at you," those are the people that are in fact the butt of the joke and they can't tell.
Yes, that's usually how it goes, but don't tell
I'm
them
trying to
that; it would
remember.
break their brains.
I saw something recently. I can't remember what it was. Um, but it was a video about. Oh, I know what it was. It's this guy interviewing a woman. It's a fake interview, but about the fact that she didn't put her cart back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he's interviewing her about like what in her life caused her to be so entitled that she thinks that's okay. Um, and it's a joke and it's done in good humor, and I thought it was pretty funny. Um, and then I read the comments
Oh
and
God.
realized that there were so many people that were the person being made fun of that did not know that they were the person being made fun of.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and my my response was, "Yep, I've probably been that idiot a few times." But theirs was like, man, it was so ridiculous, and like how many people were like, "Oh yeah, these other people that do this thing I don't like." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's you. Like that's who they're making fun of."
Yeah. Yeah. You find that in a lot of I would say current cultural discourse is one side or another claiming like
This wasn't even a side thing. This was literally just a type of behavior thing.
yeah, but then you have to
Um,
understand that that type of behavior is there because of like, fucking the patriarchy and shit. And you'll read random stuff where it's just you'll read stuff from people, for example, like the putting the cart back of other like, the random like just general self-awareness stuff where I'm gonna just pull a random example out. There was now I'm missing it. But yeah, basically the same type of situation where you have people who are like, but that's okay though because of insert this, that, or the other, and it's like, or either not getting the joke or trying to excuse the joke, and it's the butt of the joke. For example, we had a whole thing with uh people identifying with the like personally identifying with I believe it was the orcs in Lord of the Rings being comparable to Mongols. And this was an Asian guy who wrote that. It's just like, no, that's not what it is at all. You know. But it's just randomly just pull something out of the ether and then, run with it. It's very
well,
fucking weird.
we've gotten so into this whole you need to see yourself
Oh god.
in whatever it is.
Yeah, but I kind of go to
Um,
fiction to see literally anything but me. It's called escapism for a reason. You know. It's
yeah, but like there's been so much of there is a wrong way to be entertained that
yeah, you can't make those jokes because that might offend somebody, or, you can't have the character who has this really horrific backstory because that might make someone uncomfortable. You know, I remember
yeah, but
when,
on the other hand, having dark mysterious pasts is like the thing,
oh, God.
as long as it's the right kind of dark mysterious past.
Oh, Lord. But you don't understand. Like, with me, it's different. Tips, fedora, Cheeto dust flies everywhere. You know.
You know, their idea of dark mysterious past is I lost a relative and or loved one and now I'm out for revenge. My idea of a dark mysterious past is I secretly was performing experiments on children in my basement and, found the key to immortality, but now I'm racked by guilt, for the rest of eternity, as I am trapped in this form. And all I can hear are the sounds of their voices.
Oh, so you would like the Seer character. Okay. You know.
You know, I'm just saying, like, if you're gonna have a dark, mysterious past, make it a dark, mysterious
Make it a
past. Damn
dark,
it.
mysterious, yeah. Make it a dark, mysterious, past. Like one of the things I really like about the game I mentioned earlier, Darktide, is there are different, depending on the class you choose, you get to like pick different backgrounds for the character, and they each have like their own voice lines and stuff. One of the characters in there is one of those like not the edgy Cheeto fedora character of, I have a dark mysterious past. No, his dark mysterious past is that he has, a voice in his head that he thinks is the God Emperor, and that voice in his head tells him to do things like, killing people, or, killing multiple people, or,
That's not a dark, mysterious past. He's just psychotic.
well, he doesn't do it anymore, largely because he's stuck in with a bunch of the other player characters. But yeah, you know, it's, and that's why he wound up on the Tancred Bastion. But that's the background for the character I prefer. If you're gonna go the whole route of, oh, he has a dark history in his, as his background, make it A, actually dark, and B, make it interesting. Because the ninth guy who's like, everyone in my family got killed, is like, yeah,
and
we know.
C, make it actually matter.
Yes.
Like, how has it traumatized him? How has it affected him? Like,
is he the one?
Otherwise, it's.
Is he the mech warrior with a horrible case of alcoholism because he's, he is the last survivor of his lance that got completely wiped out, And that makes him not particularly the most reliable character, There's stuff you could do like that that's interesting, not just, oh, I'm moody and I don't know.
Yeah, and a lone wolf, even though I have to play with a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah. Yeah, you know the type of character I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. But it's a lot like television shows where like something terrible happens to one of the characters, but then the next time there's absolutely like no fall out of that from that at all.
Looking at you, Supernatural.
Like
Looking at you, Supernatural.
Yeah, did not watch it ever. Not my kind of cup of tea.
The first episode is the only perfect episode of Supernatural. There are other okay ones, but the first episode is perfect because it is, you have the meta plot, you have the B plot of, demons, monsters, all that shit. It's getting more powerful, it's more of a thing. But the main story is just two dudes go out and kill monsters. That's it. That would have been fine. If they'd stuck to that formula, show would have been great. Problem is, the entire rest of the show is just, it goes from like soap opera drama to just, you can tell the writer is just like, enjoying torturing his characters by the end, that kind of thing. And you're just like, it's not.
Well, because you have to stay emo. Like, it attracts that particular kind of, that's during the Buffy era where,
oh god,
teenage angst was the selling thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, I liked parts of Buffy, and then Angel got his soul back, and it sucked after that.
I mean,
Angel was the best bad guy, specifically because like he gave history and weight and baggage. He wasn't just another bad guy. He was somebody that she had once cared about. Her having to kill him. Spoilers, except if you haven't seen it by now. Too bad. Her having to kill Angel in order to save the world was amazing. And then they brought Angel back. And I was like, no, this is bullshit.
I mean, for me, I've tried to get into Buffy, but I never make it like past the first like 5 episodes because it's just so. Look, it wasn't cliche when it came out, but now,
because everything wanted to be Buffy.
It's the Joss Whedon effect of just, you can't really go back and appreciate a lot of his older stuff. Okay, the exception being Firefly, but you can't go back and watch a lot of his older stuff and it's without being like, oh my god, this is everywhere now.
All right, I find this fascinating because I thought Firefly was okay. I have never understood the hard-on everybody has for it.
I can probably explain that.
Have Have you seen Dollhouse?
No, I don't believe I have.
Dollhouse was also a Joss Whedon. It came out at a similar time. It was canceled in 2 seasons. Nobody has ever heard of it. It was so much better. And the fact that everyone continues to keep screaming about Firefly when Dollhouse existed drives me crazy.
I think probably a lot of the things with a lot of the attraction to Firefly is specifically its aesthetic. A lot of people really like the look of it.
That's possible.
It
But
is
that is different from saying it's a great story.
it has
That's
some
not
definite, like, there are parts of Firefly that are really good. I really like a lot of the themes of Firefly are really good. I like the main thrust of the conflict is very interesting because it's not something you would really expect from Hollywood of this era, but it's if you read into the subtext, it is, and not even the subtext, the body text of it. It is very anti-authoritarian in a way that is not common for Hollywood. And that I think that is what intrigued and made a lot of people like it. A lot of the episodes in Firefly that are not dealing with like the meta plot are literally just space western episodes. Like that's basically what it is, but with really snappy dialogue and that kind of thing. And that's what I think got a lot of people into it and kept them there. Also, it kind of wrapped up in a fairly-ish satisfying way with Serenity, so it had a decent ending. But yeah, as Aerodale points out,
I like Serenity a lot, um, especially the fact that it was not a perfect happy ending.
no, yeah, I
Because
would
that
agree
just
with you
wouldn't
there.
have that would not have felt realistic.
Yeah, Mal's no more running speech from Serenity is one that'll give you chills every time. Um, but for me, I've read my issue is I guess I'm kind of spoiled because I've read a ton of literature. I have a voracious appetite for books. That I didn't when I was young, my parents were worried about me because I didn't like to I would not read until like very late in my development. And they just couldn't like figure it out. But then my brother started like reading books with really cool covers that got me intrigued. Um, and I was like, I want to read this. And he's like, okay, I'll read you the first book in the series. So he read me the first book in the series. He's like, now you got to go do it yourself. And then I went and I got my dad to read me a couple more. But then got impatient and I couldn't. I didn't want to wait anymore to like get to the next part of the story. So I just buckled down and started like forcing myself to learn how to read. And after that happened, it was just off to the races. And as
Like I said,
Arid can
if you
tell
think
you,
you don't if you think you don't like to read, it's just that you haven't found the right book.
I got into reading to the point where it was honestly kind of unhealthy. I was reading, and I can still do this. I found it out yesterday that I can still do this, but I could knock out a like mid-sized novel in less than a day. And that I was doing that to such a preponderous amount that like my health actually started to suffer there for a little while. Because it was just I was staying up way too late every night reading through entire series, and yeah. But because of that, I have a lot of stuff I've read over the years. I read the Dune books, the first two, well, one, and then midway through the second one, which made me put it down because there was a couple of things in there that just really bothered me that I couldn't really get over. But I read a lot of science fiction. I read a lot of fantasy, and I read a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily from like the big publishing houses. I read a lot of indie fiction, and I got very into web novels. And you'll find in indies a lot of concepts that aren't really explored elsewhere. You'll see a lot more of the more out there versions of fantasy. Like the fantasy settings, that the magic is not technically magic. There's one I'm thinking of where the magic in the setting is a form of nanites, where people basically got to the point where we were so advanced technologically that we basically were able to command nanites to make whatever or do whatever we wanted them to. And it was programmable through neural interfaces. And we got to the point where we were so used to it that we literally forgot how to do anything without it. And we kind of developed to the point where we basically forgot, like, where that technology came from. And by the end of it, like, you have certain people who can use them, certain people who can't. And it's basically a fantasy setting where people are basically trying to rediscover, like, where does the magic come from? And it turns out it comes from ancient humanity, which was, hyper advanced. And, we're able to do stuff with neural interfaces and nanites that were extremely interesting. But stuff like that makes concepts that get taken into the mainstream and then made boring. Looking at you, MCU, with what you did with nanites. Fucking lame.
Natty has a question for you.
What are web novels? Okay. So web novels are, that's like asking what books are. Web novels are basically books that most people that a lot of people write for and put out on the internet for free in a far less edited version than what is the final product that they get an editor for, print it, and sell it. And I know a lot of authors who've done that. Actually, kind of how I found you, Goat, was through a guy. I read his web novel called First Contact. Let me see if I can find the guy's podcast. You went on there one time, and I saw you on there after I had subscribed to him because I was hoping to get more Ralph's interviews. 1 second.
I'm trying to remember who this could be.
Damn it. Because he has a lot of, like, RPG guys on and that kind of thing. And I found him because I was looking for Ralph's interviews and I couldn't find anyone that was doing them, and I found his channel and he had a couple on there, or at least one. God. But yeah, good sites for web novels. Royal Road. There's a bunch of others. Royal Road's gotten a little bit more censorious since their acquisition by Amazon. Amazon's doing their whole thing that they always do, where they come in and they buy up a company and ruin it. So that's a little concerning.
Amazon is evil.
They are. They are, but they're gonna rule the world eventually.
My loathing for Amazon is well known. I have made no secret of it. Therefore, when they rule the world, I'll be the first one up against the wall, and I'll be happy about it.
Yeah. I can't find it. That makes me feel really bad.
That's all right. I'm apparently the one that was on the show, and I'm sitting here trying to think whose show I've ever been on that.
But yeah, I found a bunch of different Royal Road basically now serves as a pipeline of, you go from writing on Royal Road, writing web novels on there, to getting your book published on Kindle Unlimited or Kindle. The thing with Royal Road and web novels,
so you can lose 50% of your royalties to Amazon.
Yes. But the thing is, what made that interesting to me is because web novels, unlike a full-on book, the author a lot more has to keep people engaged every chapter. So, every chapter has to have something interesting. And so what usually winds up happening is that they'll wind up making the chapters slightly longer, and so it winds up functioning more like one of those old adventure serials from from back in the day, which can lead to mixed results.
Kind of like the Green Mile was published originally.
Yeah, or like the old Shadow books, or I have them behind me right here. Let me see if I can pull these down without
Natty,
destroying.
Natty says, Natty says, hiss, Kindle.
Yes. Okay. Let me see if I can pull this down without destroying my back display. Okay. Uh, camera. Okay. There we go. So this, uh, damn it. Why is it not going to do? This is The Adventures of Lou and Charlie. I may have to do a thing here. Just go there. There we go. There we go. It did change. Should change. Change. Change background. There we go. So this is The Adventures of Lou and Charlie. It is a very old, like, adventure serial, and they would publish. Yes, it is bad green screen. That's part of the reason I had it turned off. I need a new background. The Adventures of Lou and Charlie is a adventure serial that ran in a magazine back during the 1950s and 20s. The first chapter was published in. Let me crack this open. Trap Lines of Rat Lake Club was published in 1926. So it's basically just an adventure serial about, like, outdoorsmen and that kind of thing. Very cool. Lots of fun. And I kind of grew up reading those because we got the magazine that they still run the reruns of that in, called For Fish and Game. And they're very fun, like, short stories. And they'll go from anything from, like, 12-ish chapters. I don't think they usually go, like, they're like novella length books. But a lot of web novels wind up having similar, like, formatting. Because to get people to keep reading it, you kind of have to make every chapter that you release interesting. And
Yeah, Green Mile ran into issues because he kept having to summarize the same things over and over again. And so when they re-released it into a single book, it just ends up sounding incredibly repetitive.
yeah. These don't really run into that particular issue, but when it comes to, like, web novels, like, the thing about web novels is you could, for a time, until they started sticking everything on Amazon, for a time you could just go back and read the whole book. So you could find, like, completed novels on there. And because they weren't beholden to Amazon for, like, the I believe it was the Kindle Unlimited thing, you could just keep the whole thing up there while you went and sold your book. And that was really
Seems
cool.
like it would be good advertising too.
Very good advertising, because then if you really liked it, you could go and buy the completed edition with all the editing in there that makes it a little bit more legible, and you get the whole story in a much more cleaned up form, basically like reading a bunch of rough drafts of novels.
It's like being a beta alpha reader or beta reader.
Yeah, the only problem with that is that occasionally, like, you get the completed work and you compare it to the original, and the original had more interesting stuff in it that they cut out for the later story. Like, the editor probably came in behind the author and was like, well, that won't work. It's like, but that was the cool part.
Yeah, people don't seem to understand, including editors, that is not an editor's job. An editor's job is to literally edit, not tell you how your story should be written.
Yeah. And the
Now,
authors
publishers, mainstream publishers, will hire people that have the word editor in their title, but what the editor's job is in that case is to make sure that you line up with their brand. That's different. But if you hire an editor for an independent work, they should, depending on what your contract says, you can ask them to do nothing but look at grammar and spelling. You can ask them to check for inconsistencies. You can ask them to check for things that aren't clear. But the point is that it's your story. They can make suggestions. They could say, "Hey, I think this section like doesn't really." I have run into this. I'll say like, "This paragraph sounds really cool, but it doesn't fit your story. I would suggest you take it out and save it for your next story because it just doesn't fit here, and it needs to be better appreciated somewhere else." But I'm not going to tell them they have to. If they choose to leave it in, it's their story.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding from both writers um, and editors themselves. Because I have heard so many people say, "Oh, I hired an editor," and they totally rewrote my story, and I'm like, well, don't
One,
let them.
why'd you let them do that? And B, don't let them do that.
But they think that by hiring an editor, that's what they're doing because they're used to hearing about editors working for publishers.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just not how it works. I did a goat's note on it once because there were so many people who were afraid to hire editors because they were worried about like, you know, that they were going to lose their voice in the book.
Yeah.
I've heard horror stories about editors who literally went through and just butchered someone's story. And they were like, "Here you go." And the person was like, "But this isn't my story anymore." And in those cases, the reason they're horror stories is the person had not kept another copy,
Yeah.
which was
Um,
just dumb.
yeah. Yeah. I remember reading about when J.R.R. Tolkien was like dealing with the first time he tried to get an editor for his books. And it was funny because it would range from, here, you should take out this entire section here because it's stupid, to rewrite dwarves as dwarfs. And he's like,
That actually that was actually a publisher thing. The publisher turned down the first publisher he went to turned down the book because they said you spelt dwarfs wrong, and he said, "I wrote the dictionary. Don't tell me how to do
yeah.
don't tell me how to do things."
He's like, you
Because he
should.
literally meant that he literally had written the dictionary.
He's like, you see that dictionary you're using there on your. And I told the editor that you see that dictionary you have there on your desk. Yes, well, you should look at the back and see whose name's on it. You know, because it was his.
Yep. And he had made a conscious choice to spell it differently than the standard spelling. He
But
did, however, make me like fail spelling tests several times. But
well, that's because like his spelling of dwarfs is not like dwarf humans. It's more similar to the Norse word for the small greedy creatures that Loki was constantly stealing from. Um, Back to where I can actually like grab us back towards like the main lane thrust of the topic for the stream. Um, if you had to say like you had a key inspiration for like pick 5 literary like main inspirations for what you typically do in a story, and like tell me what you would say that is. Like what do you like
well,
drawing from as an inspiration?
um, nightmares.
Okay,
Um,
those can be fun.
so we were discussing backstage. I worked in psychology for a very long time, and I worked with kind of terrifying people for a very long time. And I assure you, there is nothing I have read in literature more terrifying than what I did for work on a day to day basis.
Okay.
And that is probably why I run mostly horror games these days. um, but even aside from that, I have quite a background in social psychology, which is sort of like how groups affect people's reactions to things. Um, And running games, that works really well because you can see these patterns that develop and you can kind of predict what it is people are going to do to a certain extent. Which isn't to say they don't surprise me as individuals, but as groups, you're always going to find that there's one person who ends up becoming the leader. There's one person that, ends up becoming the comedian. There's one person who ends up becoming, the timeskeeper / rules lawyer. I ran a game not that long ago. This is one of the Numenera games that's currently on hiatus. And all of the players are playing teenagers, and they're in school, and they've been sent out for a test, but the test is being run by an older student that they really hate. And during the test, the student falls down a cliff and breaks his ankle. And they have to make the decision about whether or not they're going to leave him there, whether or not they're going to finish their test, whether or not they're going to abandon their test in order to try and get him help. And what they don't know is that that is the actual test, is to determine how they will react to someone they don't like getting hurt. The kid faked being a jerk and everything specifically for the purpose of this test. And you get the person who says, nah, fuck him, leave him. You get the person who says, well, we have to bring him up because if we don't, we're failing part of our test, which is that we have to come back with everyone. And what if we fail our test? You have the person who says, we can help him and pass our test. And then you have the person who says, well, if we can't, then we have to choose, human life over graduation kind of thing, because it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
That is far better to me than, Dungeons and Dragons having you pick whether or not you want to be lawful evil or lawful good or whatever. You put them in a situation and you see how everybody reacts. That not only tells you how they're going to react to ethical decisions, but it tells you how they're going to work together as a group, because they're going to have very different ideas about how to solve the problem. And do the ones that want to pass their test just walk off and, go do their work, or do they stick around because the majority of the group has said, no, we really need to help this person? So giving them a little thing like that at the beginning, you can really learn a lot about the game, and that helps you determine how you want to format the game. Because if you have a group that's really divisive and half of them are ready to split up at the drop of a hat, you're going to run a very different game than if you have everyone that says, no, the right thing to do is to help this person. We're all going to stick together and work together and screw everything else. That almost never happens, by the way. In fact, there was an article that just got posted that I really strongly, if you're interested in gaming at all, or you're just interested in how people think, John McOwen on Substack put out an article yesterday called "The Commonality of Heroism," specifically about the fact that so many people that roleplay these days do not want to be heroes. They just they actually act like playing a good role is something disgusting and annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, which I kind of hate. Personally, I don't know if it's some of those previous life experiences I mentioned or other factors growing up, but I generally do not like playing evil characters or playing characters that are morally questionable, because having dealt with a lot of very devilishly unpleasant people, and if you deal with a lot of very unpleasant people, you start to feel like people who are actually decent are a rarity.
They are.
And
I am totally convinced that if everyone had a chance to get superpowers, um 95% of them would probably become villains.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it
And
also.
they would all in their own heads have a very good reason for doing so.
I mean, I'm also I'm also a Christian, so I have a certain theological bent to this, I suppose. Um, the Bible says that the heart of man is desperately wicked, and that people are generally selfish and self-centered. Um, and from life experience, that appears to be largely true. Now
Yeah,
I
but
would.
see, I think there's a difference between wicked or evil and self-centered.
Yes, I would. I have also made that.
Those are very different
I
things.
have also made that argument, but then again, that comes to a problem. A problem in translation, I think, because if you look at the word used in the Bible for sin, for example, it doesn't mean what a lot of people think it means. It's
Yeah,
a archery term.
it means to stray from the path.
It means to miss the mark. It's an archery
Yeah.
term, specifically meaning you miss the target. You know,
Yeah.
and I think
When used more generally, it's to stray. When used in the term of sin as we think of it, it means you have strayed from the proper path, not you are, eternally terrible.
yeah, and I would say that people as a general rule are relatively relatively self-interested and very willing to put themselves above others. And so I find characters who are actually altruistic and not selfish um, quite interesting. Like it's the eternal dealing with a moral character in an inherently immoral world, you know, where the general sort of thrust of a lot of settings is that you have a place where a lot of people who are very self-interested, very selfish, to use that term, and the people who are selfless are, and this is all, we are speaking in broad generalizations here, the people who are selfless are actually quite rare and quite interesting because of their motivations to be that way. Because they can have different motivations for being a selfless person. You know, you have some people who are raised to be selfless. You have other people who come to selflessness through, lived experience. You know, and I find that kind of character interesting. You know, it's part of what I think is interesting about a lot of film noir characters is you often run into the knight who needs a shave character archetype, you know, which is a character
Well, I mean,
who
the
eventually
whole
will.
point of sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the whole point of noir is you take a character that's not good and you put them up against a character that's so much worse that you have to root for them anyway.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, I would agree with that. But then you have the occasional character who is very much a knight who needs a shave, you know, ultimately trying to do the good thing despite definitely needing a shave and a haircut and a new set of morals and probably a lot of other things.
See, I am somewhat sadistic. What I like is taking the altruistic character and putting them in a position where they have to choose whether or not to make a non-altruistic decision for the greater good.
But then you get into a question of whether that is truly non-altruistic to make that decision. And then if you run into the certain characters who can choose to do the I often find you'll find there are a lot of authors and writers. This is just a personal anecdote slash thing I've noticed, who like to give the moral character, the altruistic character, if you will, a choice between a binary choice between doing the thing that seems right in the moment and doing the thing that seems right in the long term. And oftentimes, they do it in such a way that there are obvious third options, but they present the character with a false binary and then make them choose to violate their principles. And that is something I find a little annoying.
Have you seen Knock at the Cabin?
No, I don't believe so.
Uh, Knock at the Cabin is a gay couple who are on vacation with their daughter.
Okay, that explains why I haven't seen it.
And it's very good. 4 people show up at the cabin and tell them that they have had a vision from God and that one of them needs to kill another one of them in order to save mankind. It's basically, the choice of Abraham and his son, except that there is no last minute save.
Okay.
And every time they refuse, one of the 4 kills themselves. And then some terrible environmental thing starts up.
Okay.
And so the
I can
entire
see
one of
the
them is
allegory here.
well, one of them believes that because one of the 4 is a guy who attacked the gay couple in a bar once. And so one of them is convinced that all of this is a setup because these people are homophobic. But one of them is like really religious believer and believes that no, this is true. And so the whole thing, I don't like the fact that it ends, it does not. I would have liked it if they had left the end more morally ambiguous. They give you a definite answer at the end as to whether or not it was real. And I wish they hadn't. But the whole idea is, do you kill someone you love on the faith that it will save the world?
Mm-hmm. That is that's an interesting question there. And
Because there are possible outs. Like they're in a cabin, so there's a delay on the television, and he says, this, we don't know that this is actually happening. This could be we don't know that they're actually predicting this, there could actually be a storm, but it's been on delay and they already knew about it because it was on the radio or something.
mm-hmm.
um they're just taking events that are happening and using it to try and convince us to do this terrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
um So there's nothing definitive for most of the movie that says yes, like either the world is really ending or it's really not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's just the suggestion that maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this 2 very opposing perspectives between the 2 guys as to whether or not it's happening or not.
Mm-hmm. Sounds slightly familiar to me as far as like in video game terms, because I believe it's what Far Cry game is it? One of the Far Cry games. The main character is sent in to investigate this and take down this cult leader, who is basically predicting the end of the world. And at the end, now depending on the ending you choose, but one of the endings that you can unlock by doing a bunch of extra stuff as far as investigation goes is you think throughout the entire game that, oh, they're just crazy and they have they're they're all seeing this stuff. It's made up. It's group hysteria. Group hallucinations. It's not real. And at the end, you see nukes go off in the distance, if I remember correctly.
Well, I mean, even Last of Us, at the end where Joel has to decide whether or not to let them
Yeah.
kill Ellie or, in the potential for a vaccine. I mean, that's a less religiously based one, but it's the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because people tend to look at that very differently than they do um if it's like if you happen to be religious and you're looking at something like Knock in the Cabin, then like faith is really important. And yet
Yeah.
there's still a different like gut reaction to letting scientists cut a girl's head off.
Yeah, but then again, um, I find that most people, and I'm not trying to be offensive to people who are atheist, or agnostic. You know, I believe that people usually come to God in their own time if they're going to at all. But um, or rather in His. But I find that a lot of time when atheist or agnostic people write religious characters, they don't generally do it in an honest and actually interesting way. As a general rule, from what I've seen, and this is something you see a lot in modern Hollywood, whenever they try to write religious characters, they write them in a way that is not how people who have strong religious or moral convictions act. They act in a way that is more crazy than convicted. Um,
Knock at the Cabin, neither of them act crazy. They both seem quite rational. They just have different perspectives.
but it's something that you don't. I tend to get leery when people recommend stuff like that because it's like, yeah, but is it though? And then again, it also comes from not all parts of, for example, Christianity are the same. You have very large differences in what people believe. My personal beliefs would probably veer more towards like the Calvinist reformed side of things than the than Catholic or Orthodox manners of belief. There's a lot of theological difference in how that acts and how people within those sects act. Now, before someone freaks out and is like, "You're Presbyterian or you're Calvinist," I'm non-denominational. Relax. Um, and I kind of have my own opinions on the current state of the Christian church, but I'm not going to go into that here because this is not a discussion of theology. Um, but yeah, I tend to be very very leery of modern stories trying to handle religion because they usually do it pretty shittily, from what I've seen.
So, for the record, I just looked it up, and the writer of Cabin in the Woods is actually religious.
Uh-huh.
I was just being curious.
Yeah.
Um, I thought it was well done. And I think, I think normally the take is you get people who say, no, it's, hoopla, and I'm not going to do it. Or you get people, like you said, you get that dichotomy. Or, yes, I have faith, and therefore, I will murder my husband over this.
Mm-hmm.
My take is I would totally believe it, and the world can burn because I'm not laying a finger on my husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
My husband, on the other hand, might very well kill me in that situation
Mm.
because he has a child and I don't.
Mm.
And so for him, it would more come down to whether or not his kid was more important or I was.
Yeah. And of course, that provides an interesting moral quandary in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Well, and that's why the couple has the daughter in this, because it's not just about whether or not one of them dies, it's whether or not they're risking their daughter's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see where that would prove very interesting.
Yeah, and I love those put people in odd situations and see, like I said, the person on the cliff,
Yeah.
you know,
I as
see
a
who see who makes not just which choice they make, but why.
yeah. I as a general rule, I as a general rule don't like unwinnable situations. I do not like, as a general rule, personally, um, the people on the tracks, the trolley problem, as a general rule. I do not like those kinds of things because they always feel lazy to me. Um, there is usually there's usually a third option, and
See, I find it fascinating you look at those as see, I would see an unwinnable as being, well, you choose to kill the one instead of the five, but then you go to pull the lever and it breaks and the five die anyway. That to me would be the unwinnable.
well, the thing is, I suppose this is a perspective thing, because if you hold all life as sacred, having to kill anyone, is a is a loss to some extent. Um, Now that there's an exception there, if you have to kill a murderer to stop him from, killing someone who's innocent, that's obviously not an unwinnable situation, because, you know, that person is choosing to murder someone else, and thus, excluding them from the
What if they
the
murder pedophiles?
aha.
See, this is the kind of thing I run my games on.
I regret to comment on. I will.
There is essentially like
refrain
to
from
read.
commenting.
There is a book called Justice by Michael Sandel. He teaches ethics, I think, at Harvard. And he has videos, or at least he used to. He decided at one point that he wanted people to be able to benefit from his lectures, even if they couldn't afford to go to Harvard. So he taped his entire class and put it up session by session online.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually starts with the trolley problem, and then he like throws little twists into it so that the situation is kind of the same but not really.
Mm-hmm.
So like he goes from, okay, you can turn the trolley and kill one person instead of letting the five die. So that's the standard problem, and almost everyone says, well, I take the one instead of the five. Then he says, so you're standing over a bridge watching the trolley come. And then you realize that standing next to you is a very fat man, and you could push him off the bridge in front of the trolley.
I have heard this before.
And everyone was like, ooh, I don't like the way that feels. And he's like, what's the difference? It's still, you said it was 1 versus 5. This is still 1 versus 5.
Mm-hmm.
And he does an entire class working through kind of the standard ethical dilemma problems that, everybody thinks they know the answers to, and then giving them these little twists as to how they might be slightly different but get the same result. And it's amazing to watch how people are like, oh, 1 versus 5 suddenly doesn't feel very good.
Mm-hmm.
Like having to actually touch the person that is going to die, like, is somehow different.
It makes it less personal. It's like the difference between it's the difference between military leaders who have to lead from the front and military leaders who lead from a nice, comfy office somewhere. You'll find, if you read a lot of history, that military leaders who lead from the front tend to be far less willing to throw away people's lives needlessly than people who are sitting in a nice, comfy office somewhere. Like if you read about comparisons between, I believe it's some of the generals they had during World War I on the Allies and then on the Axis side, it's very different for the people who are actually down in the trenches and their leadership style and what they asked from their troops, compared to people who were able to just sit back in, you know, somewhere in Russia and just sign a paper and be like, yeah, move these guys here. You know, take this hill by this time. And you're just looking at a timetable, because it does not allow you to dehumanize the action. Which is why people who are actually out there in the shit tend to be a lot more I have a very different perspective to people who are able to depersonalize the issue.
I'm going to remind you, this started with a discussion on how I run games.
Yes. And
now we've gotten into like theological warfare. Theology and warfare, I mean.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of things, you know, about the way people think that fascinate me.
Yeah.
How conversations take place. I do have a hard cutoff at 9 o'clock. Okay. So is there anything else you'd like me to answer in the next 10 minutes?
Yeah, actually. Where are you going to be? What are you going to be doing for the next week or two? Like, what's your schedule as far as streams, videos? Plug your shit.
Well, honestly, a lot of the next week is going to be processing about 200 pounds of vegetables, 250 pounds of vegetables. However, Slice and Dice will be on Monday. We are doing the weekly wish list of Kickstarters that look cool that I can't actually afford.
Okay.
I will be on the Chinwag next Wednesday. And other than that, the only thing I do need to put out a Goats Note this week and next week. I do little blips that are kind of common editing errors that I see in people's writing when I'm editing. And so I do these quick, like, 2-minute notes to just be like, hey, here are some common things to look at and make sure you're not doing.
Okay.
So I put those out about once a week. And I am in the process of doing a hashtag the book is better for Watership Down.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
All right. Okay.
Ben is lurking as always. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Ben. Good to see you, brother. I'm gonna make a few like recommendations for stuff you should check out, because you've been so kind as to, you know, suggest tabletop RPGs to me. As far as like games that you should check out that are good RPGs, as far as like video game RPGs. Daggerfall. It's free. It runs on a potato. Check out Daggerfall Unity, which is also free, and it runs on a potato. If you can follow instructions, you can get it installed and play it, and I will guarantee you that it will be very interesting. Another one I'd recommend is... I'm talking about RPGs here. Oblivion. You should probably look at Oblivion, because it's a different type of RPG. Elder Scrolls is weird as far as an RPG franchise, because it doesn't focus as much on it is not hyper narrative focused. It is more exploration focused, if that makes sense. There's a lot they do with environmental storytelling that is very, very interesting. But beyond that, as far as like more like traditional like CRPGs and stuff, I'd suggest checking out Rogue Trader if you ever get a chance. It doesn't have super high run requirements.
Yeah, I think my husband may actually. My husband is a huge Warhammer guy. I think he has that.
You should check it out. They're coming out with a new game called Dark Heresy, but I can't recommend that until I play it, which I will be doing at some point. There's a couple other ones that I can't think of right now for some reason. It's like, I'm gonna talk about this, and then it evades me. Yeah, those are the two I can think of off the top of my head. Definitely Daggerfall. Definitely Rogue Trader would be ones I would suggest checking out. Also, take it from me, they get really good on as far as analytics go. if you decide to stream them. But
Well, I have to have a new computer before that's ever going to happen. So
true. Okay.
the 16-year-old antique isn't going to stream anything.
How have you functioned in modern society?
I just don't do a lot of the things other people do.
Oh God. Okay.
Hey, I went like 6 years without a cell phone until work made me get one. I have not enjoyed a minute of having one. So
Oh.
when this one dies, I will not get another one.
They do have their perks, largely being audiobooks and the ability to read a lot of ebooks. But yeah, that's all for now. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to plug... Here's Goat's channel. Go check it out. Down there.
I do have a question for you since you were talking about video games for a second. How do you feel about resource allocation games?
As a general rule, they're not really my thing. I am someone who likes... Okay, that's not entirely true. I played a bit of Minecraft, like, way back in the day. And I played Age of Empires, but that's kind of a resource allocation game, but it's more of like an RTS kind of thing. As a general rule, like, not really my thing. I am someone who likes RPGs. I like immersive sim games. I like some action games with a lot of caveats. And I like some first-person shooters, but most shooters, I've gotten to the age where I can't play them and have as much fun as I used to. Like, I used to be able to just sweat my way through lobbies on games and have a good time, but I've gotten to the point where I like spending time with, with other people and being able to have conversations, and you can't have a conversation if you're sweating your way through, a lobby with 30 other people who are all trying to kill you. So,
I mean, apparently there are games where you can shit-talk each other a lot, but...
You can, and it is fun for a little bit. But after, like, the 9 gazillionth time that you call someone a fucking retard, it gets a little old, And you can get very, very creative, but...
I asked because there is an indie game, once again, games no one's ever heard of, called Help Will Come Tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a historical game that takes place immediately after the fall of the Tsar in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And rebels or terrorists, depending on how you look at it, bomb a train track, and the train crashes. And you end up with 4 random passengers on the train. You can get servants, you can get scholars, you could get, rich people, you could get rebels, you could get anyone. And the resource is that you have to go through is you have to get them to get along so that they can survive. Because if you can't, they have very opposing viewpoints, and if you can't make them get along, then they just all go off in their different directions and they die. That is the perfect kind of game to describe my love of looking at how people work together in groups. And for the record, despite that, I almost never win, even on the easy setting, because the game is miserably difficult.
You would like Rogue Trader then, because everyone in there, like, just to use an example, there is a character who is a Dark Eldar, who you can get to join your crew, but you have to keep the, let's see, the Inquisitor, the Sister of Battle, your right-hand man, your Seneschal, half the crew, the Psyker, the, thief character. You have to keep, like, basically everyone else from killing them multiple times, and them killing everyone else. And there are like a bunch of different characters who have extremely opposing viewpoints, who just hate each other's guts. And you constantly have to basically, either you let them, kill each other because you agree with a certain viewpoint or another, or you have to keep them all playing nice with each other, which is what I usually choose to do. Um, However, I wanted to say I did remember who it was that I saw you on their channel, and was part of the reason I got interested in you. The T-shirted historian. Very cool
Oh,
dude.
yes.
Very cool dude. Um,
Yes. He was supposed to be on a while ago, but he on my show a while ago, but he had like family stuff. So
yeah,
hopefully we will get him on. We'll reschedule him for something else.
absolutely. Well, thank you all very much for coming on, Goat. I appreciate it a ton.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully I was at least somewhat fun to talk to and not a complete bore. Um,
It has been a good go around.
okay. Which means, chat, that she hates my
Still,
guts and will never come back on.
I I still think that you should check out A Knock at the Cabin.
All right.
If only to push your own envelope a little bit.
Okay. I will consider it. But yeah.
I'm also a very big fan of people doing things that make them uncomfortable.
Gee, I hadn't noticed. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it a ton. Um, if you ever want to come back on, hit me up.
Okay.
I would love to have you. And I mean, to be fair, your conversations are like half as uncomfortable as half of the ones I have with Arid so you're fine. But yeah, I will be around I will be around this Saturday. Standard time, maybe. It might push the stream back to 6, chat, because I may wind up like butchering a deer. It's the opening day muzzleloader.
Ooh, I was gonna say tis the season, huh?
It is indeed the season. If I do not wind up doing that, then we'll be going around at the standard time of 3 p.m. And you can find me next Monday as well. We'll be doing something. I might play more of Dead Space. I don't know. I didn't really enjoy that game near the end there. We might just play more War Thunder. And if not, I will see you all definitely next Wednesday for more Pathfinder, and we'll try and get through that game. I don't like starting stuff and not finishing it.
Wait, what's this about Pathfinder?
So we're playing Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous on stream. I played it because I liked Owlcat's adaptation of Rogue Trader, and it is a perfect example of a studio is only so good as the thing they license out.
It's a video game.
And while I liked Rogue Trader a lot, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is certainly a CRPG. Yeah, it exists. Like I don't hate parts of it. Which is why I'm still playing it. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought you were talking about like the role-playing game Pathfinder, and I was like, oh, why did you start with that one?
I started with Rogue Trader, thank God, with playing, like, the CRPG version of Rogue Trader. But I will have to eventually, like, pick up an RPG and play it, because I really need to do that at some point, just to say I have. If no other better reason presents itself. But yeah, thank you all very much for coming by. Arid thank you for modding and being awesome as usual. Ben, love to see you, man.
Maybe if I restart the Numenera game, I'll throw you an invite.
Okay, absolutely. Natty, as always, a great pleasure to see you, madam. And once again, thanks for coming on. And for now, ladies and gentlemen,